All right. Good morning and happy Friday. We are very excited to welcome our esteemed guests today, members of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives and their staff, as well as staff from the House Education and Appropriations Committees. And we particularly thank you for bearing with us throughout all of the session schedule changes. We know that it wasn't the easiest to make it here today, this morning, with everything going on in the House. And we know that some of our colleagues are not able to join us today, and we'll make sure that they get this recording of the webinar and have additional opportunities to learn about our report. My name is Laura Boyce. I'm the Pennsylvania Executive Director of Teach Plus, a teacher leadership nonprofit that empowers excellent, experienced, and diverse teachers to take leadership over key policy and practice issues that advance equity, opportunity, and student success. I'm also a former high school social studies and English teacher and an elementary and middle school principal. So on behalf of Teach Plus and the National Center on Education and the Economy, who lead the PA Needs Teachers campaign, I'm very thrilled to welcome you to this briefing on our recent report, PA Needs Teachers Addressing Pennsylvania's Teacher Shortage Crisis Through Systemic Solutions. I'm going to drop the report into the chat, so please feel free to follow along with us, and we'd love for you to read it in more detail later. The PA Needs Teachers report was generated after a summit that was held in September of 2022. Several of you were present at the summit. At this summit, 150 policymakers, higher ed leaders, K-12 practitioners, including teachers, superintendents, principals, and nonprofit leaders gathered to discuss the issue of teacher shortages in Pennsylvania. So today's briefing will summarize the major findings and recommendations from the report in order to inform legislative efforts this spring to address teacher shortages. And we will be sharing these slides and the recording of this webinar after today's briefing.
So what is the scope for teacher shortages in Pennsylvania? Good morning. My name is Athea Lewis, and I'm an elementary school teacher here in the William Penn School District and a Teach Plus 21-22 Teach Plus Policy Fellow. As a teacher in a hard to staff school district, I see the consequences of teacher shortages every single day. I worry about how it affects my colleagues and my current students and all of the future students in the Commonwealth, especially those who are experiencing educational barriers. I also experience those factors that are contributing to colleagues leaving the profession or never entering it in the first place because they see teachers and they're like, I'm not going to do that. Or never entering in the first place. And that leads to a workforce with only 7% of teachers of color compared to 37% of teachers of color. PA Needs Teachers to report, PA Needs Teachers report explores a number of data points illustrating the severity of teacher shortages in Pennsylvania. I want to focus particularly on this striking graph. The blue line, as you can see, the blue line shows how the number of newly certified teachers in Pennsylvania has plummeted 2/3 in a decade. The red line shows the number of emergency permits issued to the teachers to fill open positions in the field they aren't fully qualified to teach. And compared to the number of newly certified teachers per year in 2021, the number of emergency permits outnumber the newly certified teachers for the first time, a huge warning sign that our supply of teachers in PA falls short of demand.
Good morning. My name is Beth Patton, and I'm a social studies teacher and department chair at Kutztown Area School District. I was also a 2021-22 Teacher Plus Policy Fellow. On this next slide, you'll see what some of the summit speakers said about teacher shortages. Acting Secretary of Education, Eric Haggerty, said, "Our educator workforce crisis is one of the most urgent challenges facing our school. We owe it to our students to innovate and ensure a robust pipeline of great teachers for years to come." And Scranton teacher Holly Mead said, "A teacher shortage creates an educational famine that affects every child and every teacher in a school. How do we try to find people to fill these positions that are going to bring academic rigor and emotional connectedness to our children?" I think it's the children who end up really losing the most when they don't have a teacher in the classroom. I see that big picture and it scares me. I recently talked about this in an op-ed that ran the Reading Eagle and other outlets around the state about teacher shortages and how they're affecting my district. I'd like to read a piece from it. During the height of the pandemic, I walked into a room with 50 plus students in search of my principal. At least 10 students were gaming or watching YouTube videos. Some chatted with friends through email. One was asleep at their desk. My principal sat at the head of the room, attempting to answer his phone and his email while monitoring the students. That day, my principal covered 7 different teachers who were absent. I remember watching our secretary as she feverishly reviewed students' schedules to make sure that there was coverage. Our superintendent even drove a van to pick students up to come to school. Miraculously, our students did not miss a day in our buildings. Our tiny public school district continued to serve our community as best as we could. As a teacher, though, I wonder, is this only the beginning? Will we be forever short-staffed? Are there kids out there who even want to be teachers when they grow up? Last year, our teachers union didn't provide an education major scholarship to a high school senior because there were 0 graduating students that wanted to be a teacher. This is heartbreaking.
Good morning. My name is Amy Morton, and I'm the System Design Specialist for the National Center on Education and the Economy and co-author of the report. I'm also a person who's served as a Pennsylvania educator, and I'm in my 40th year of service after being a high school social studies teacher, district administrator, and IU executive director, and a couple of times as a deputy secretary at the Pennsylvania Department of Education under both Republican and Democrat administrations. So I've seen the evolution of this issue from when we were exporting more teachers to other states to the point where we can't fill our own classrooms. At NCEE, where I work, we research the world's best performing education systems in order to give states and districts the tools they need to become world-class. And in my role, I work with Pennsylvania superintendents and principals. So I want to just spend some time talking about the root causes of some of the challenges that we're facing now. And they predate the pandemic. So while the pandemic exacerbated the situation, these issues are systemic and long-term. In the summit and within the report, we've identified 4 primary root causes, and we won't go into these in so much depth today. So we strongly recommend that you read the report because there's a lot more detail on them, including Pennsylvania specific data and a couple of case studies of promising practices that we can look to for counterexamples. But let's just explore these a little bit. First, the financial value proposition for becoming a teacher in Pennsylvania continues to worsen as the cost of college and other expenses to enter the profession rise, and teacher compensation remains low, relatively speaking. Over the past 30 years, the cost of public in-state college has more than tripled from $8,000 per year to over $26,000. And meanwhile, inflation-adjusted average weekly wages of teachers have been relatively flat. In 1996, weekly wages of other college graduates rose 28% since 1996. They've risen over 28% over the same period, which leads to what is known as a wage penalty of 15.2% for Pennsylvania teachers. The cost benefit equation just doesn't make sense for many prospective teachers, particularly for those from low income backgrounds or those considering working in underfunded schools where salaries are typically lower. Second, interest in teaching and the status of the profession continue to decline, particularly among younger generations, including my own 2 children who happen to be math and physics certified but do not teach, which makes recruitment into the profession more and more difficult. What we know from national surveys shows that the interest in teaching among high school seniors in recent years is way down, and only 37% of parents want their children to become a teacher, which is down from 65%. Interestingly, when we look at surveys of members of the Gen X, Millennial, and the Gen Z generations, it suggests that those who make up the bulk of potential teachers in the workforce are looking for working conditions that the current teaching profession doesn't typically provide, including opportunities for advancement based on competence, a team environment with shared responsibility for success, and work-life balance. And even teachers themselves are discouraging students from entering the profession, with over half of them saying they would not have advised their younger self to become a teacher. And thirdly, in Pennsylvania, preparation and induction experiences, because we have 97 different higher ed institutions providing teacher certification programs and over 130 programs approved overall, those experiences can be of varying quality and consistency, and they often lack adequate exposure in rigorous subject area content. They are sometimes diminished in terms of the amount of pre-service clinical experience that a teacher has, and they don't always have effective support from highly skilled and experienced mentor teachers, which makes the alignment between the educator preparation program in the district sometimes there's some missing links there. That is not the case in all higher ed institutions who have great partnerships with local school districts, but unfortunately it is too often the case where we have principals and district superintendents telling us that the people that are coming to them as candidates for teaching positions are not adequately prepared for the reality of today's classrooms. And in fact, half of new teachers, because of that preparation and other factors, leave their first school placement within 5 years. And then finally, many Pennsylvania teachers experience incredibly stressful and isolating workplace conditions without opportunities for the kind of career progression they might see in other professions. So in Pennsylvania, for example, and it's true in other states, teachers are typically associated with a salary schedule that advances them in compensation based on the number of credits that they've earned and the number of years that they've served. In most places, that is not the case. You advance on the basis of the level of competence that you display and your ability to develop the capacity of others and improve the conditions of the workplace overall. And so I think there's a need for a really strong look at the manner in which we compensate teachers and the impact that is having, the negative impact it's having on attracting young people who are going into other professions for the same degree of education that they're paying for, and not only starting at a higher salary, but also being given opportunities to advance much more quickly than in teaching. Here's a perspective from a first-year teacher, and I will read it because I'm not sure who's able to see the screen or might be on their phone. And this is from Josna Marie Stalkar from Susquehanna Township School District, who was one of our panelists at the summit in September. She said, "One of my kids asked me, 'Why did you choose to be a teacher?' one day. And another kid shouted from the side of the room, 'Being a teacher sucks.' And I was like, whoa, it's not that bad." But he said, "Well, my dad said it does. And I see on TikTok and I see online, all these people don't like teaching. And I'm on the same internet and they have a point. What they're seeing from their parents online and on the news, it doesn't look good. They're not inclined to go teach. They're not inclined to be in the place that they just struggled in, because we have 40 kids in my class."
Good morning, I'm Zakia Stewart. I'm the Pennsylvania Policy Manager at Teach Plus, where I lead our policy fellowship with teachers across Pennsylvania. I'm also a former elementary teacher and a district leader. So the purpose of this report was to find solutions to this crisis in teacher shortage, and solutions in helping Pennsylvania become a world leader in recruiting and retaining high quality and diverse teachers. And so we've set up a set of design principles, policy design principles, that we believe these solutions would stem from. So to begin, the first is the profession must fundamentally change. In order for us to make teaching more attractive, we just heard from a teacher talking about the perspective of students and families about what teaching looks like. Well, we need to shift that narrative. And we can do that by making the teaching profession appear more closely to other professions, where there is more collaboration, there's compensation based on competency, their values, there's values alignment, and expertise is valued as well. The second is the teacher shortage can't be solved in the long term by lowering the bar. We cannot lower the bar, absolutely not. The stakes are just too high. This is for our students, and we want to make sure that we're not cutting things like certification and instructional standards just to save costs, which might make sense in the short term, right? Because we are in a crisis, but in the long term, it degrades the profession. It lowers the standard of teaching and instruction, which ultimately hurts our students. So we want to make sure that the changes that we make and the solutions that we come up with not only maintain the standard, but raise it so that we can support the future of our students. Third, any policy solution that involve investment of additional public funds should improve both the quality and quantity of the educator workforce. It's an absolute must. A strong teacher workforce is one that is diverse and is highly qualified, and Pennsylvania is in need of that balance. Policy solutions should function primarily as incentives rather than requirements in order to reduce compliance mentality. Couldn't stress this enough. Again, the stakes are too high for us to resort to box checking and half-stepping in this effort. We want to make sure that we set up systems that are in place that cultivate innovation, where people are open to showing their work, so that we are consistently thinking about how we can get better at it so that we can improve things for our students and ultimately our society. So incentives is the best way to go, as opposed to making things requirements in our view. Next, policy solutions should be systemic and address root causes. So we don't want the Band-Aid approach, right? There's just too much going into creating even the short-term solutions that I brought up that are lowering the standards. There's a lot of work going into those, and we don't even want that. We want, so there's a lot of work going into raising the bar and building solutions as it is. So we want to make sure that they're addressing the systemic problems and that they are looking at root causes, because we don't want to come back here again having to address the same issues over and over again. We want to continue to grow and develop. Finally, policy solutions should drive both excellence and equity. So Pennsylvania is, it can be a little bit deceptive because we are typically achieving on the higher end nationally when it comes to things like graduation rates and test scores. But when you break that down among different demographics, you'll notice stark gaps and disparities in the student achievement. And so we want to level that out. So we can look at the achievement that's happening already, and we can know Pennsylvania has what it takes. We want to expand that, and we want to make sure that that hits every student so that every student can be excellent and that there can be equitable education spaces everywhere. Next, I'm going to read this quote, and I'll begin. Both structural solutions will be necessary to address the root causes of educator staffing challenges and transform teaching into a desirable profession that attracts and retains highly qualified and diverse educators to shape not only our children's futures, but also our Commonwealth's future economy and workforce. Thank you.
Thank you, Zakia. And hello again. If you were late hopping on, my name is Laura Boyce, and I'm with Teach Plus Pennsylvania. And we want to move towards the end by identifying 5 specific strategies from the report that we see as key priorities for state level policy action. It's our hope that these strategies are going to make their way into legislative language as well as into this year's budget process. Just a note that these strategies are informed by existing research on what is most effective in recruiting and retaining high quality and diverse teachers, as well as national and international comparisons and the recommendations from participants in the summit, including some of you. So these strategies are, first, incentivizing high quality teacher preparation. And when we say high quality teacher preparation, we are really thinking about rigorous coursework and intentionally designed clinical experiences that are developed in partnership between educator preparation programs and their local education agencies, whether those are districts, charter schools, IUs, et cetera. So as Zakia mentioned, we really believe that we should go the route of incentivizing versus requiring across the board changes or shutting down of programs. But we're imagining investment of funds to incentivize that close collaboration between ed prep programs and LEAs, so that they can redesign pre-service teachers' preparation experiences in a way that allows all teachers to be prepared on day one, so that they can come into these schools that they are familiar with and be set up for success and not leave. Specifically, we envision that in order to qualify for funding, these partnerships of ed prep programs and LEAs must demonstrate these intentional shifts, ensuring teacher candidates are diverse and reflective of the communities they serve, ensuring that they're getting prepared in actual high need subjects and or to teach in high need schools, that they're able to obtain their degrees for free in exchange for a commitment to teaching in the partner LEA for at least 4 years, that their education prep experience develops deep subject area and pedagogical content knowledge through rigorous, cohesive coursework that importantly aligns with the curricular approach of the district or LEA, and that they participate in a year-long clinical residency under the mentorship of an effective trained mentor teacher with additional aligned mentoring during induction. And to connect back to what Zakia mentioned about equity, we envision, if resources are limited, that preference could be given to high need districts, along with educator prep programs that have a track record of success, partnerships that have extremely strong working agreements and plans for collaboration, and programs that pursue registering their programs as teacher apprenticeships so that they can unlock other sustainable sources of funding. The strategy, which we envision as being closely tied to the first strategy, is to invest in teacher retention through well-defined career ladders. So if strategy 1 is about better preparing the next generation of Pennsylvania teachers, strategy 2 is essential because it's about retaining those better prepared teachers, which we know can't happen without incentivizing districts and other LEAs to develop innovative staffing models that incorporate teacher leadership development, career ladders, and a more flexible approach to scheduling and staffing that's going to drive teaching to become more collaborative and professionalized. So in order to qualify for additional funding, which districts and LEAs could use for teacher leader compensation and training, as well as their own capacity building and technical assistance, LEAs would have to create teacher leadership roles such as lead teacher, mentor teacher, and clearly define those within a career ladder or leadership capacity system that allows teacher leaders to take on progressively more responsibility for impacting student achievement and leading the learning of their colleagues as they demonstrate more competence and ability to develop the capacity of others. And we recognize that these adjustments might involve changes to salary schedules, to master schedules, to staffing structures, to collective bargaining agreements, and other district policies and practices. Again, we aren't envisioning mandating those, but instead incentivizing districts and LEAs to voluntarily make some of these shifts in partnership with teachers and teachers unions in order to qualify for additional support that would allow these shifts to be sustainable. And again, as we think about equity, priority could be given to high poverty LEAs that are facing the greatest staffing challenges. And again, this strategy really we think about in combination with strategy 1, because ideally we're targeting those same LEAs and districts that are also partnering with ed prep programs to improve the preparation experiences of their teacher candidates. Third, expanding pathways into teaching for youth and paraprofessionals. Many of you are aware of the progress that's been made around teaching pathways for young people in the past year with changes to this past year's school code, where there is now a new high school career and technical education pathway for teaching that will be offered to high school students starting next year. So Pennsylvania should continue to expand that pathway, as well as dual enrollment opportunities for students to start working towards becoming a teacher in high school. In addition to just, providing those opportunities, funding is important to expand them, as well as support and incentives to LEAs and educator preparation programs to ensure program quality, public awareness of these pathways, clear articulation agreements to allow for transfer of credits from high school into college, and expansion of those opportunities to students in every district in Pennsylvania. We also see a lot of promise in the strategy of paraprofessionals to teachers. Many districts around the state are experimenting with new pathways and additional funding and support for those pathways, and potentially getting those pathways registered as teacher apprenticeships is another promising practice for tapping into a new potential pool of teachers that's often more diverse than the current teaching workforce, more connected to the community, and brings really valuable experience in schools that would make them, well prepared on day one. Fourth, we have to improve the financial value proposition for becoming a teacher. As Amy said, right now, the entry costs are too high and then the rewards and compensation are too low. We need to make that value proposition more appealing. So Pennsylvania should explore multiple avenues and funding sources, including the teacher apprenticeship model, which has really come out of Tennessee, but is taking off around the country, as well as service scholarship programs, which are also popular around the country, to move towards our goal of making it free to become a teacher in Pennsylvania. We should also be thinking about other financial barriers that can be eliminated for teacher candidates. So that includes the cost of certification exams, that includes unpaid student teaching, which could be instead a paid experience similar to other paid internships and apprenticeship experiences that are experienced in other fields. And also investing in loan forgiveness for teachers, especially in high need subjects in schools. And then finally, we do believe teacher pay is a part of the equation. It has to become more competitive with other fields that require a bachelor's degree. We recognize that that's difficult in a local control state, and tend to think that the best approach to this is both increasing overall school funding and using programs such as Level Up to accelerate funding to those most under-resourced school districts so that they can raise salaries locally, as well as thinking about targeted financial incentives from the state for teachers in high need subjects in schools. And then finally, the fifth one is not that sexy, but is very important: improving data collection to allow for targeted investments in the teacher pipeline. We have a lot of gaps in our current data collection system. We actually don't even know for sure the number of teacher shortages or the number of vacancies across the state of Pennsylvania. We're only able to estimate using proxy measures because that's not data that's currently collected in Pennsylvania. And so we need additional data to identify and anticipate teacher shortages, to measure the effectiveness of different programs and initiatives, and to understand root causes of teacher dissatisfaction. So with that, we specifically want to see Pennsylvania starting to collect data on demand for teachers as measured by vacancy numbers and rates, to begin tracking teacher candidates longitudinally from the Ed Prep program into the workforce so we can understand which programs are doing the best in terms of preparing teachers who actually stay and succeed. We'd like to see a statewide teacher working conditions survey and teacher exit survey so that we can better understand why teachers are staying or leaving. And we'd like to see publicly accessible dashboards for some of the data that's already collected, but is not accessible to the general public around teacher supply, demand, retention, and satisfaction, as well as educator preparation program success.
And Laura, can you stay on that slide for a minute?
Sure.
So I just want to underscore something Laura said so that it's not lost, because the three items across the top are completely interrelated. The ones on the left and the right, in terms of incentivizing teacher preparation programs to improve and expanding pathways for young people into teaching, are going to be investments that do not have the highest return if we also don't do the one in the middle. I just can't emphasize that enough. I work with teams of teachers and district administrators and principals around the state, and there are many examples that we can point to where there has been a very deliberate effort to change the working conditions for teachers by empowering them, since they are generally the ones with the greatest level of expertise. And that expertise is in terms of teaching and learning, and that expertise needs to be acknowledged and recognized in a way that allows the highest performing teachers with the greatest amount of expertise to rise in that system, but retain their role as teachers to build the capacity of others. If we don't do that, then those young people who are looking for the kind of collaborative work environments that are aimed at solving problems are going to choose different professions. So as much as we may want to invest solely in the left hand and the right hand items that are listed there across the top, we can't do that and expect a great return on investment if we haven't also attended to the working conditions for teachers. Thanks for giving me that platform. So what have we been up to? As you can see here, when understanding what our efforts have been all about, we initially wanted to build awareness. So we held the teacher summit that Laura described at the outset. And the value of that summit cannot be understated in terms of bringing multiple sectors of people who have an interest in this issue together and recognizing the issues that emerged from their conversations, as well as the data that we've included in the report. And that's what gave rise to what was just shared in terms of the policy principles and strategies. So that initial phase, we hope, has been successful in helping people understand what this issue is. And we continue to do these kinds of briefings and other activities with policymakers, advocacy groups, pretty much anybody who's willing to talk to us. And we'll be testifying at the Senate Education Committee's hearing next week as well, which was called in response to this report that we've put together. Our next phase, which has already started and will continue as we build a coalition, is to do the briefings, do the conversations, invite partner organizations and individuals to join us, and create a level of excitement and enthusiasm for the kinds of policy strategies that are emanating from the policy principles that we've outlined today. So we're in that process as we speak. And finally, as we're preparing to launch into our next phase, it should take us through the end of the budget season on June 30th. And during that phase, what we hope to do is work with the legislators and the governor's staff and the Department of Education and others to pass bipartisan legislation and create budget investments that are aligned with these policy strategies. This is a bipartisan, it's practically a nonpartisan issue, or at least it should be. So we really do hope that we will have the support of both Democrats and Republicans moving forward. And to date, in our briefings with legislators, we have seen a great deal of enthusiasm for the approach that we're taking.
So we're going to go to questions in just a moment, and I did drop some directions in the chat for that. So if you have a question, we'd love for you to go ahead and get started on posing that using the Q&A tool in the chat, in the toolbar, or by sending us a message through the chat. But before we go into those questions, we just want to offer a few ways for you to join our efforts and stay engaged. So first, we'll be continuing to update you on our campaign, including any legislation that's being introduced that you can sign on to co-sponsor. We also would love for your support in sharing this report with your colleagues, with your members, and with other staff within the building to help us ensure that these recommendations are prioritized within the education committees, within the policy committees, the appropriations committees. And we would also welcome the opportunity to participate in additional hearings and press conferences. We're hoping that the House Education Committee, once it's formed, would potentially have a hearing similar to the one that the Senate Education Committee is having next week and continue to draw attention to this issue. If you're interested, or if the member whose staff you are a part of is interested in taking a lead role in the crafting of legislation or a legislative package, we'd love to talk with you. Please reach out to me and Amy, as we are planning to move quickly in March on policy development and introduction of legislation. And we know that many of you have also been involved in individual legislation and efforts to bring attention to this issue. We would finally invite you to follow us on social media at PA Needs Teachers across Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, and to share out our content so that your constituents, your colleagues, the general public can continue to see this issue as a priority. So with that, I'm going to take down our slides, and we're going to save the remainder of our time for any questions that you might have about the report, about the recommended strategies, about how these strategies might look as they move into the specifics of legislation, regulation, budget pieces, etc. So we will keep an eye on the chat and the Q&A to see if folks have questions.
And as you're thinking of any questions you might have, I dropped something in the chat that I live in the Enola area, right across the river from Harrisburg. If anybody wants a printed copy of the report for your legislative office, we're happy to provide that.
We are all teachers or former teachers, so we definitely know the value of wait time. So we're not going to, looks like we've got one question that's come in, and we'll give it some time to get some more. So Nancy says, thank you for this webinar. I'm Chief of Staff to Representative Peter Schweier and also serve on the school board of the Allentown School District. We experience everything that you've touched on here. Can I share this report with my colleagues on the board as well to solicit advocacy? Absolutely, we would love that. We have already shared this report with PSBA and have also shared with them slides so that they can help to circulate it. So Nancy, we can follow up with you in addition to just getting the regular slides that we use today. We can get you a version with notes that can be shared with colleagues on the board. We also just presented yesterday to superintendents with PASA, and many of them are also interested in sharing the report with their boards. And we are welcoming individual school districts and school boards to sign on as campaign supporters. I'll drop the link to the sign-on form for any organizations, boards, et cetera, that want to sign on in support of this campaign.
And I was notified by one of our colleagues who's on this call that the chat is disabled for participants. So by all
Let
means,
me see if I can change that.
Yeah, use the Q&A as some people are already doing. So this question from Susan Knoll, you mentioned some places had made deliberate attempts to change conditions of teachers. Can you give us an example or two? Also, some examples of scholarship programs to grow teachers would be helpful. Where has this been done well? So let me take on the first one. There's several districts that we're working with. The one example that comes to mind, because I work with them quite a bit, is Grove City, and the other is some work that we're doing with Octorara School District to create a level of leadership among the teachers so that they can be helping and actually being the designers of their own professional learning. I know Fleetwood and Whitehall Copley are both working on a more deliberate approach to defining the qualifications for people who serve in mentor roles and cooperating teacher roles. But in all cases, what they're doing is trying to provide collaborative learning time for teachers to help grow one another to be better servers of the students in ways that elevate the status of the profession. And I'm more than happy to follow up with you, Susan, to give you kind of the specifics associated with that, because I'm sure there's some others that I have forgotten. I know Governor Mifflin School District made a really good attempt to modify, and this is kind of an interesting approach. They said, why do we send our teachers out and pay for tuition reimbursement for them to go to higher ed institutions for postgraduate credit that they use to move on our salary schedule, when often those credits are not having an impact in a change in teacher practice? And so they created a system. It took quite a few years of getting through a collective bargaining process, but they created a system in which their own teachers provide quote unquote coursework that is credit bearing from their perspective, that involves teachers in learning from their colleagues and then being awarded that credit once they've demonstrated the application of the new learning in the classroom with students. And it became an alternative means of the credits associated with moving on the salary schedule. And the money that was saved by not paying a higher ed institution for tuition reimbursement was then utilized to pay those teachers. So they just simply repurposed and redistributed the use of funding that was much more aligned to their vision and goals. So those are just a couple of examples. And then when it comes to scholarship programs, what I can tell you, and I'm sure Laura can add to this, there are examples. We had Palisades School District, for example, who was at our summit, and Bridget O'Connell, who's the superintendent there, had created a career pathway with her staff and students so that at a very reduced rate, through the Northampton and Bucks County Community Colleges, the students were already taking college-bearing coursework that was leading to an education, that there was coursework that could be applied to a teacher preparation program. And there's a couple of examples like that around the Commonwealth, but Laura might have more to add to that.
Sure, I was going to provide a little bit more of a national perspective on that question around scholarship programs. There's a number of states that have statewide teacher service scholarship programs. North Carolina was one of the first, but there's a lot of them now that involve, a certain number of scholarship dollars per student, oftentimes in the range of $4,000 to $8,000 per year in exchange for a commitment to teach for a certain period of time. And those states have them designed slightly differently. Some of them it's just a commitment to teach anywhere in the state after graduating from college or from their teacher prep program for a certain number of years, oftentimes 4 years, the same number of years they're receiving scholarship support. Others have it specifically tied to, committing to teach in a high need school or a high need subject. We think that there's a lot of interesting things to learn from Tennessee, which recently launched a competitive grow your own grant program where they put the grant out to educator prep programs who had to apply. As part of their application, they committed to using the grant funds to make the cost of tuition and all other costs for preparation completely free for candidates. Oftentimes this included them basically negotiating a significantly discounted tuition rate and also making some commitments around, the diversity of the candidates they would recruit, the level of partnership that they would have with their partner LEAs and districts. And so they've seen a lot of success with being able to attract a lot of new candidates into the profession, got a lot of interest from higher ed, and were able to make some significant changes to the cost structure as well as the actual quality of the program in a relatively short period of time. So a number of different models to explore in terms of scholarships, but we think there are things to be learned both nationally and internationally that we can study. Other questions?
We really appreciate the time that you have taken to be with us today. And as Laura noted at the beginning, this is recorded and can be shared with others who were not able to attend.
Absolutely. Yes, please do share share the recording and the materials that you receive with your members and with others within the building as they're finishing up with their voting and getting back to regular session. If there are requests for additional meetings, or if you'd like to learn more and follow up with us, we would love to hear from you. We'd love to have a conversation with you. I'll also put my email address into the chat. And again, thank you for your time. Wishing you a great Friday and a great weekend. And we hope to be in touch with you soon.